Hi, today we're looking at the world's smallest digital SLR, the Olympus E410. Okay, so it's not that small, but this is still a pretty small camera. In fact, just to give you an idea of how small it is, here it is next to a Sony H9. This is a bridge camera, and if you put the two next to each other, you can see that although the Olympus is slightly bigger, it's not massively bigger, and obviously most of the extra size is taken up with the lens. The E410 is actually an upgrade for the E400, and there are a fair few differences, although superficially on the outside it looks pretty much the same. The main difference is that they've switched from using a CCD sensor to what they call a live MOS sensor. Now the main benefit of that is that it lets you see on the LCD screen what you're looking at before you take the picture, like a compact camera, whereas most SLRs you can't actually use the LCD for composing, only for viewing the pictures after you've taken them. Another new feature is the new processing engine, which is basically what turns the data captured by the sensor into a picture that we can recognise. This processor on this camera is a lot faster than the one on the E400 and enables you to shoot at 3 frames per second for an unlimited number of JPEGs or for 8 RAW frames before the buffer fills up. So that's enough about what's on the inside of the camera. Let's look at the outside. Well, one of the first things you'll notice is the absence of a hand grip. This is virtually the only digital SLR that doesn't have the big hand grip, and is one of the reasons why it is the smallest digital SLR in the world. Now this isn't necessarily a big deal, because back in the 70s all cameras looked like this, and in fact this harks back to the classic Olympus OM series, the OM1, OM2, OM10, which was so popular back in the 70s. The top plate control is fairly conventional. There's a mode dial at the top which has the usual range of exposure modes, and there's a scene mode switch so that you can go in and select scene modes in addition to the most commonly used ones, which are obviously on the dial as well. There's a thumb wheel control for changing apertures and shutter speeds and things like that. And next to the shutter button, which is here, there's an exposure compensation which enables you to override the exposure set by the camera if you think it is going to be too dark or too light. You have a fairly big screen here, and on this side we have a play review button to look at the pictures you've taken, a delete button, menu and information which gives you your shooting data. Over on this side you have an exposure lock and focus lock, and then you've got the 4-way control pad with the OK button. The only other feature of note on the body is when you open the flap and look at the card slot, you'll find there's actually 2. There's one for compact flash and one for XD cards. While the E400 was a good camera, it wasn't perfect, and one of its problems was image noise, the grainy texture that can affect detail and introduce coloured speckles into pictures. Unfortunately, Olympus is no stranger to noisy cameras, as its 4/3 sensors are smaller than most, which makes them naturally prone to high noise levels. However, in the E410, Olympus has switched from a CCD to a live MOS sensor, and the results are phenomenal, at least in terms of noise control. Whether it's purely down to the sensor, or more likely a combination of advanced processing and live MOS, I'd happily take images taken at any ISO setting on the E410 and enlarge them to A3 print size. Even at ISO 1600, the noise that appears isn't unpleasant. One of the main differences between the 4/3 format and the formats used by other digital SLRs is that the shape is quite different. It's actually more square. It uses a 4:3 ratio rather than a 3:2 ratio. These are actually the same proportions as most photo frames and enlargements, so if you're getting an 8x10, an 8x6, 10x12 print, you can get prints without having to crop the image you've taken. But you do really notice this lack of width when you look through the viewfinder. It's a much squarer picture. It's also, I have to say, a little bit on the small side. Looking through the viewfinder of an E-series camera like the Olympus E410 is a bit like looking down a long dark tunnel when you compare it with cameras like the Nikon or Canon. But that's a fairly small black mark on what's an otherwise excellent camera. We give it 89%, and it's a camera that we'd happily recommend.